This is Tim Smith, and you're listening to the Studio Success Formula podcast.
Welcome to the Studio Success Formula podcast, the business school for dance studio owners. And now for your host, Clint Salter.
Hello, dance studio owners. It's Clint Salter here from Studio Success Formula, and thank you for joining us. Our guest today has been living musical theatre and singing for his entire life. He's currently the Associate Musical Director on The Lion King and has worked on over 30 musicals, including Mamma Mia, Billy Elliot, and Legally Blonde, one of my favourites, Tim. And he's an expert when it comes to singing. He's the Artistic Director of Vocal Alchemy, and his vocal workshops have been conducted throughout the globe. Today, he's going to be sharing with us his many tips and strategies for creating a studio with a strong musical theatre and singing streams. Please welcome our guest on the show today, Tim Smith. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Clint, how are you going?
I'm going extremely well. Much better that I get to talk to you today.
Oh, that's too kind, mate. That's too kind.
Now, I've given our listeners a little bit of information about you, but can you give us a little bit more info on how you started in this industry and how you got to where you are today?
Probably lots and lots of practice. This industry actually came looking for me. I was a school teacher in my previous life. I taught secondary music and English for about 7 years at a number of schools in Melbourne.
Wow.
And at the same time I was doing that, I was doing a ridiculous amount of amateur musical theatre here in Melbourne as a musical director, so probably for about 10 years. So probably I did about 30 amateur musicals here in Melbourne from the age of 18 till I was about 27. And towards the end of that, obviously, some of the professionals have heard about what I do and the quality of my work, and they started calling me for little bits of professional work, and those little bits became bigger. And one day I was offered a job that was a full-time contract on a show, and I walked out of one of Melbourne's biggest private schools, actually walked out of their music department into a musical, and I haven't looked back since.
Wow. So it was kind of, you had this passion and you started in that amateur kind of society field, and then, you know, this skill, talent, hard work just got you kind of to the next step.
Absolutely. You know, all I ever wanted to be was a school teacher, Clint. You know, some people criticise that, but I just wanted to, I wanted to save the world is what I really wanted to do. But I do know in my experience that the things that I now do at Lion King, a whole lot of them I started learning when I was 18 years old and doing amateur theatre. And I know that there are different schools of thought about that, but I certainly come from the school of thought that any performance experience, good, bad or ugly, is better than not. And certainly working with, you know, hundreds of different amateur performers and different amateur companies around Melbourne, I just learnt so much about musical direction and how to help people do today what they couldn't do yesterday. And that's really now what I do. I'm known in my vocal workshops for being able to transform people's voices in 15 minutes. And those are skills that I started to build, you know, over 30 years ago. So for me, it's been a natural progression. I didn't set out to work professionally, but that's what happened.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're still a teacher.
I am still a teacher, and I think that there's a part of me that will always do that because I just love watching people be at point A and watching them move to point B and then on to point C. And, you know, that's how I think about myself. You know, my own skills, I have a commitment to improving my own skills every day. And what I can do now as a musician compared with what I could do 10 and 20 years ago, it's vastly different. So, yes, I'm very much into the sky's the limit for all of us. And, you know, once you do the work, you never know where that might take you.
Exactly. And isn't that an important point? Once you do the work.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of people don't understand, if we talk specifically about singing, a lot of people don't understand that all of us can learn to do, I think all of us can learn to get to 8 out of 10 quality level. Whether we get to 11 out of 10, well, that may well be in the hands of the gods in terms of talent. But I certainly know that I can take people who really have no experience and may not think they're very good singers, and after, you know, 12 or 18 months of good solid work, they can often be astounded at what they do. One of the things that I take great pleasure in is people who have never been cast in a big show come to me, you know, and they may well be 9 out of 10 dancers, but they're always cut at their singing auditions. And I take great joy in helping those people prepare vocally and get their first jobs. I have students who are playing leads all around the world in musicals, and that gives me great joy. But I really think I get more joy of the students who get their first show. I mean, you've been there, Clint. There's nothing quite like that first contract on a big show. It just changes your life.
Exactly. And so let's talk about that, because they walk in, they say to you, and this is for our dance studio owners that are listening, they've got a lot of really highly skilled dancers.
Yes.
They know that probably won't work in a musical because their voice isn't up to scratch. And like you said, will get cut when they've got to sing a line or two. And so what are the qualities that dancer has that walks into you and says, look, I need help with my singing? Who are those people? What are the qualities of the people that go out there, do the work, get the job? What qualities do they have versus the people that don't get the work?
Well, you've already identified most of them. And the fact that they walk into the studio is the most important thing to start with. Lots of dancers that I work with, because they've danced their entire lives, and there was in the old days, there was this philosophy around which said if you're a really good dancer, you can't be a singer as well. Well, that's absolute rubbish, because we know that that Australia produces and continues to produce a number of world-class triple threats. And so I think the most important thing for the young dancer performer is to actually engage with this skill of singing, and to not say, oh, well, here I am, I can't sing, I'll never sing. If all of us thought that way, nothing in the world would ever occur. And you have to remember that, the world's greatest singers, or even the world's greatest dancers or actors, or in fact anything, went to their very first lesson one day. I can play the piano, and I have been my entire life, but I still have a clear memory, Clint, of going to my first piano lesson at the age of 6, where I couldn't read music and I didn't know which note was C or which note was D or which note was E. But of course now I'm a little bit further along that track. If I'd simply resigned myself to the fact that, I can't read music and I don't know the names of the notes, therefore I can't play piano. Of course, everyone would realise that's a ridiculous concept, but that's how a lot of young dancers see themselves as singers. And I think it's a terrible, terrible thing. So you have to take the step and engage, and realise that until you start to do some of the work, of course you're not going to get better.
Yeah, exactly. I resonate with that so much, and I love, Tony Robbins talks about, when did you say to the baby who kept falling over, okay, don't worry about walking.
Yes,
just don't worry, but just stop it. Just crawl for the rest of your life.
There's a story of a man who actually ate an aeroplane. I don't know if you know this story.
No, I haven't heard it.
There's a story of this some crazy person in the United States who ate an aeroplane. It was one of those little light Cessnas that you see at the suburban airports. And what he did, and I'm not quite sure why he wanted to do it, but he filed down this plane, and he had a mouthful of this plane every day. And one day he took his last mouthful and he'd eaten an aeroplane. Now, I'm not advocating that we necessarily go out and do that to improve our motivational and process skills, but nonetheless, anything that we as human beings set our mind to, we are absolutely capable of achieving. And for young performers, that's the way they have to think, that nothing is impossible and everything is achievable if you do the work.
Yeah, and I think, and again, it always comes down to the work, because, I've worked in studios, you work with lots of students as well, and I'm working with studio owners all the time who say they want it. It's up on their vision board. It's a goal for them to be in XYZ musical. But when it actually comes down to the implementation and doing the action,
yes.
to get to that point, that's where things seem to fall over.
Yes. Well, I suppose that we look at, we make the mistake of looking at world-class people, and we always see them in their end result, but we never see them at the beginning of that process. And we never get to see those world-class performers as they evolve their process. But in actual fact, what we're looking at when we look at a world-class performer is we're not looking at an end result. We're looking at the result of a studied, thought about, considered process, if they're great performers. And that, of course, is a lifelong journey in whatever skill area we're talking about. And so really learning to dance or learning to act or learning to sing is about beginning a journey that most likely never ends. I certainly say to my students, we're aiming for the perfect note, But I pray that we never get there, because if, as donkeys, we get the carrot, well, what will we do then?
Exactly.
So you're trying to evolve this mindset or this approach which says I'm beginning this journey that I hope will never end, but I know every step I take, I end up closer to the perfect destination.
So, Tim, you've worked with students around the globe who want a career as a performer. We've touched on a couple of these qualities, but what other qualities do you see time and time again in the students that actually make it and sustain a full-time career in the entertainment industry?
I think tenacity is the key to that, Clint. I absolutely know that the performers who have longevity of career and who climb the ladder in terms of moving from ensemble perhaps through to covering principals and making it to the heights of being cast as a principal are ones whose tenacity shows while they work, while they're doing jobs, but also how they go about their business when they're not doing a show. In other words, do they continue going to their dance classes? Do they continue improving themselves all of the time? And I guess that's the same across any industry, but especially ours, where, as I was saying before, that good performance is based on process. And I firmly believe and certainly teach that we are absolutely trying to evolve that process all the time and for it to be better and better and better. So I suspect that keeping on tenacity is the most important part of that.
And that makes complete sense. I love how you touched on once you get to that point, you get the ensemble and you're busy doing 8 shows a week, and during the day you're kind of not honing your skills, kind of learning anymore. You just get up and you go to the show. I mean, that's a big mistake to make, isn't it?
Yes, I see that with lots of young performers who get into their first show and they think, oh, I've made it. But you're taking one step that's hopefully the first step of a lifetime of steps. It touches me greatly when I get calls from performers who are wanting to come and do vocal work, who are in Melbourne, if I'm here, which I am at the moment, who are in Melbourne for 6 months or 12 months on a show, and I don't know these people. They say, I'm playing this role or I'm doing that in the show. Can I come and see you for singing lessons? And the point that I make is that when they are cast in big shows, it's when they have both the time and the financial resources to keep up that training. So it's the perfect time to be continuing to evolve those skills and then practice them 8 times a week during performance. I say to all my young students when they get to their first show, you must have the goal of being stronger, faster, higher when you finish the show than when you got in.
And a lot of people, go backwards.
Absolutely.
Because they've come out of college.
They think they've made it, but, there are people around them that are going to still be doing that. So once you have that momentum of being cast, whether or not it's your first show or your 50th, then absolutely use that time and that money to continue to get stronger, higher, faster. I think that's the simplest thing. But the number of performers that I see that don't do that just astounds me. I have a number of principals in the Lion King who externally see me from our work at Lion King for singing lessons every week. And, that's the way we have to think. We have to use that circumstance to build ourselves to be better than we were yesterday.
Yeah, and I think this is a great insight for dance studio owners as well, and our studio owners who are listening to this interview going, wow, this is an insight for our young students that want a career, to be able to educate them and say, look, it doesn't stop then, then you're on to the next thing, because you're completely right. And I saw it in Jersey Boys as well. And, especially if you're a swing on our show, we had amazing swings on our show, and you might have a couple of weeks where you don't go on, and so being able to continue to grow and learn is so crucial. And so I think for the studio owners to pass that on to their students is really important.
Yes, absolutely. We've just finished at QPAC in Brisbane, and of course it's got that lovely green room there, Clint, which I'm sure you know. And I would walk through the green room during interval, and there are our swings who aren't on for that performance, and they are watching dance videos, they're reading play scripts, they're doing all sorts of things. So they're not wasting their time. They're using it to improve and educate themselves. And I think that, if I'm an average 14 or 15-year-old, I might think, I go to 10 years worth of dance classes, I've learnt my skills, there I am, I'm ready to go. But what those younger performers don't understand, and I know I'm harping on about process, but performing artists really are a result of the quality of their work is a result of their process. And I think until the day we die, the objective is to continue to evolve and improve that process. And I know I'm harping on, but it's the absolute key, I think.
And I don't just think in your professional life, I think in your personal life as well.
Well, it's all related, isn't it, really? I mean, we as performers, whether we're musicians or stage performers, whether we're dancers, our body is our instrument, literally. And the better that instrument is in terms of its health and its fitness and its emotional state and, its happiness, then the better it will be able to be played by us, the performer.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. Now, let's kind of talk about the audition process, because auditions are very different to a dance or a musical theatre class. And I know we've got many studio owners listening who want to better prepare their students for auditions. What tips could you give them to ensure that their students have the best chance at delivering a great audition?
There are certain things that everyone goes through at auditions over which they have no control. What will be the routine? Will they ask me to sing difficult scales if I get to the singing audition? Those things. So that's based on how well trained we are and what our process is like. But the other side of that is my own preparation for that audition. Now, I see dancers who think, I'm not going to get to sing, I'll be cut. But then sometimes they get through and all of a sudden they have to sing, Clint. I'm sure that you have that you've seen this yourself. But they're not prepared. And I know, we professionals know that there's probably no greater pressure cooker than an audition. And yet what I see time and time again are people coming in to sing whose preparation has been inadequate. What we want to do when we walk into an audition to sing is we want to have our best, our song or our 16 bars, whatever's required, and we want it so rehearsed on our part that in the pressure cooker of the audition, we can do it backwards, upside down in Swahili and still hit our top G perfectly. Because the emotional pressure cooker for the audition is unlike any other place. So unfortunately what I see is people going in with their fingers crossed behind their back, hoping that they may land their top note in that audition, even though they've never landed at home in their practice. Well, I'm sorry, that is not going to happen. So we need to prepare for those auditions in such a way that even if the sky fell in, we'd still land our leg mount or our top G. Because really, that's all we have to do to show off that's how good we are. Because there are going to be thousands of other people whose approach is not nearly as thorough or as thought through. So, don't go into auditions with your fingers crossed behind your back hoping you land it. Go into those auditions having done what you do so many times in such an examined way that there's no way you can fail. Then it's up to the hands of the gods whether you're cast, because as you and I know, why you're cast in a show can be for a multitude of reasons, not just your skills.
Exactly. Now, I want to jump back again and talk about the training that you do. I'd love to know, when a student comes to you and you start working with them, are there any kind of consistent, mistake isn't the great word, but I want to use it because we all understand it. Are there mistakes that you see that they've had or been shown in their training and you're like, whoa, that's not how it should be happening?
Yes, I do. And it saddens me greatly because it harkens back to some of the training that I had when I was in my late teenage years and early 20s, that now that I'm much older and know more things, I realise that some of the things I was taught and the way I was taught them were actually wrong. And so what I see quite often is I see people who have had singing lessons or been to singing classes, and they've been trained by people whose understanding of the process of singing is very limited, and they've passed on those limitations to their students. Now, I'm not saying that we need to find, or that all of us can be perfect teachers, and whatever that means, I'm not really even sure what that means. But I do know that in the world of singing, unlike the world of dancing, because you can't see it, because you can't touch the voice really. It can be a mystery to lots of people. And the dangerous thing about that is that then young singers sometimes end up having lessons from other singers who may well be good at singing themselves, Clint, but they're actually not that educated or aware of the richness of the process of singing. I've spent most of my life studying every piece of vocal technique across stylistic genres I can find, with my ultimate objective being to understand that, or to understand that there are 7.2 billion people on our planet, and we all sing differently because we're individuals. Now, my understanding of voice is I'm trying to get to the point where any of those 7.2 people might walk into my studio and I understand straight away how they're doing what they're doing, what's good about that, what's bad about that, and what we can do. Unfortunately, lots of young singers don't find teachers whose understanding is as broad or as knowledgeable as it needs to be. So I guess the thought there needs to be for studio owners that they need to be very careful that this is a complex area, as dance is, as acting is, and they must seek out the best trained, most knowledgeable people to teach in their studios. I know for a fact that's not always the case, and it causes me great distress because it probably takes 10 times more energy and time to undo a bad habit than to start with a blank page and build the correct habits from the word go.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, what are just some quick kind of tips? If a dance studio owner might not come from a singing background and they might want to introduce singing classes or musical theatre classes,
Yes.
I mean, what are some things that they can look for in a great teacher?
Okay, there's an absolute difference between someone being able to sing well themselves and their ability to teach. That may seem like an odd thing, but they're totally separate skill areas. As a fundamental idea, I would absolutely encourage that the singing teacher needs to have had some classical training in their own experience. As it is with dance, there are things that dancers learn through their classical training that they can learn in no other genre. And we can spot from 100 yards away, even in a non-classical dance routine, we know the students who have got the classical training in their background because they have access to postural things, they have access to line, they have access to a sense of awareness and self-expression that are the hallmarks of classical training that don't exist in other genres. Singing is exactly the same. I don't advertise myself as a classical singing teacher. There are people who are specialists at that. But every student I teach as much classical technique to as possible, along with a host of other things. Because I know that the self-awareness that comes from the vocal equivalent of doing enough bar classes, there is no substitute for that, Clint. I could go into it technically, but I won't bore your listeners with that. But what they already understand, probably in their own training, about the importance of classical dance, same thing with singing. So I would absolutely be inquiring as to whether or not these potential singing teachers for their studios have had a decent amount of classical singing training in their background.
Yeah, great advice. Now, speaking about, recruiting teachers and having singing classes in your studio, we have a lot of members and a lot of listeners as well that talk about wanting to build their numbers in their vocal classes. Have you got some suggestions for them around growing their singing class numbers?
Well, I know that if the teachers are great at what they do, then the students will feel immediate and ongoing improvement. And then those students are going to come back to that class next Saturday at 2 p.m. happily, and they're going to tell their friends, oh, I love going to that class because I feel at the end of every class I've improved. That's probably an obvious thing, but I certainly know that if you have the right teachers with the appropriate skills and the appropriate passions, that's going to happen in every class. And so don't necessarily go for the first person who applies for the job. Go for the person whose personality, whose sense of drive, whose sense of commitment to themselves and their own improvement is something that they can't help but pass on to the people that they work with, to their students. Because at the end of the day, we can't make people do anything that they don't want to do. So if we can somehow create environments that make those students continue to evolve their own self-motivation, and what I'm saying is get the teachers who make that happen, then that's going to be a snowball effect. And we're not going to have to chase those students. We're not going to have to force them to go to class. They're going to turn up to those classes on time, prepared, with bells on. So I think the answer to your question, I think it's a huge question, of course, Clinton. It affects all of us. How do we improve those numbers, and how do we evolve that student motivation? Find the teachers who make the classes irresistible, because the clients, the students, get more than they expected, and they feel that improvement after every class.
Yep. Oh, I think it's great. And we always talk about the teachers are the backbone of your studio.
The teachers are the studio. You can have all the sequins you want, but at the end of the day, well, it's true. We all know those dance schools that sell according to how colourful their Christmas concerts are. But if you look at the quality of the work that's being done, no, it's not so good. It's the quality of the teachers. Find the best teachers.
Yep. I'm agreeing with you there, Tim. Now
Yes.
let's talk about you for a moment, because you've achieved some great things in your career. So I'd love to know, what do you believe?
Okay.
What do you believe has contributed to your great success?
I'm lucky in that I have an ongoing and lifetime fascination with voice. As I was saying before, I want to understand how the 7.2 billion people on this planet sing differently from each other. I want to understand every voice I hear. I have a quest that when I do hear someone sing, if they're doing things that I don't understand, then I listen closer, and I spend time then trying to backwards engineer the technique of how they're doing what they're doing, if that makes sense. So when I hear singers, I respond to them artistically, and I respond to them technically. And I actually do that every time I hear someone speak. And it's just a habit that I have now, that every human vocal sound that I hear, even when I'm walking along the street or through the shopping centre, I'm constantly analysing that person. I know that sounds terrible, in terms of how they're communicating and the way they're doing that. That's a deeper thing, and how that's occurring from a technical point of view. And so I do little bits of study every day, actually. My friends will tell you I'm mad at times. Little bits of study every day on the physiology of voice, the acoustics of voice, and the artistic process of voice. That, for me, is a self-motivating thing. The more I've learnt, the more fascinating and deep and rich the subject is for me. And I guess I'm lucky in that I've found something that just suits me down to the ground. It's not work for me to teach. It's not work for me to listen to people. It's not work for me to analyse why that person's doing a good performance, or why that other person may not be doing a good performance. I'm just endlessly fascinated by that.
I love it.
Did I answer your question? I forgot the question.
Yeah, you did. That swings around really nicely. I think it's this constant, having this continual curiosity.
Absolutely. We're performers. And as I keep saying, we're process-based. And that process has no end. Mind you, I have a joke with my musician friends, and we all say that, if someone had told me in my first piano lesson when I was 6 at the scales I was starting to learn to play, I'd have to be practicing those bloody scales for my entire life. Well, I don't know if I'd be a musician now, but I certainly know that's what, in fact, I have to do. So whether I'm a dancer, a singer, or an actor, or some mix of all of those, I have to be improving on that every day until the day I die. And at the end of the day, of course, Nick, you have to ask yourself the question, what else is life for? And, for me, a life of working in the arts, trying to find answers to questions that I don't even know yet, I actually can't think of anything else better to do. So I kind of like it.
Sounds good to me.
I feel blessed.
Sounds good to me. You certainly are a passionate man. Now, Tim, to wrap up our interview, what's the one last piece of advice that you have for our studio owners?
Never ever lose sight of your dreams. And your dreams as studio owners is, I'm sure, some mixture of educating and helping the next generation to have the joyful experience we have had ourselves as performers, because most studio owners, of course, have been performers or still are. And so even when the chips are down and it's sometime around middle of November and you just don't know where you're going to get the costumes for the under 6 tap routine, never despair. Never give up, because we know that the greatest experience we've had in our lives are most likely our own performing experiences, and we are charged with the huge responsibility of working with the next generations of performers and helping those people achieve their goals and their dreams. I don't know if you know the saying, Clint, that that the most valuable things are the things we cannot see and we cannot touch, but I firmly believe that. I can't touch voice. I can touch dance, but I can't really touch dance because great dance is inside the person. And we as educators and studio owners, we sign on for that responsibility. And educating the next generation and helping them fulfill their dreams can do nothing but make the planet a better place. And so even though, as I said before, we might be working with the under 6 tap class, we're actually making the world a deeply, deeply better place. So we have great responsibilities, but if we achieve those, if we live up to those responsibilities for our charges, then what we can achieve and how we can improve humanity is without limit.
Wise words.
That's just the way it is for me, Clinton. I'm sure that's the way it is for you, and I'm sure that's the way it is for most of your studio owners.
It is.
And it's been a great joy.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And there are those times, I always say studio owners go through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
But we've also stood side stage and had those tears in our eyes where little Johnny and little Mary do something they've never done before. We can't buy that. We can't buy the feeling of that. I could go out and I could spend $100,000 on a brand new car, but at the end of next week, it's just a car. So we must remember those things. And when those days are a bit tough, that's what we have to hold on to.
100% with you there. Thank you so much for sharing that. And look, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Now, I know that you've got an offer for our listeners to receive a complimentary 1-month trial to your elite singing lessons that they can pass on to their students. So can you tell us a little bit about that and how they can take up your kind offer?
Yes, we're offering... At Vocal Alchemy, we have 2 sorts of singing lessons. We have the big product, which is the Elite Vocal Series. That's 32 lessons of technique and artistry and process. That's probably at least a 1-year or a 2-year online program. And then we have this other new set of lessons called the 7-minute lessons, which are little bites of technical information to help people with specific problems. We're offering a 1-month trial to the first 6 lessons of the Elite Series. So basically... about 1/5 of that course to see how they go with the online lessons and how they go with it being in this future-driven, non-traditional one-on-one process. That trial is normally priced at $49.95, but for your members, we're offering that for free at the moment. They can have 1 month access to those lessons. All they have to do is visit vocalalchemy.com.au. And when prompted, put in their special promo code, which is Success15, and then they will have access to the first 6 lessons for 1 month, absolutely free of trial, to experience our online singing lessons.
Yeah, perfect. And I think that that's great for the studio owners to jump on, have a look at that, pass that out to any of their students as well. Absolutely. That are singing, that are doing musical theatre, that want a career, just to, even for the people that haven't sung a note in their life.
Well, the wonderful thing about that is that they can take the lessons anywhere because they're online. And by that, we obviously mean, at the beach, but we're really saying in the privacy of their own home. So for lots of young performers, and perhaps the ones whose experience has been more dance-based and less singing-based, we all know we can be very embarrassed to sing in front of other people if we don't think we're very good. So this even takes a teacher out of the equation. And allows them to begin that singing training in absolute privacy so that whatever self-consciousness they have is taken out of the equation.
Yeah, they can just get on and do the job.
Absolutely they can, without fear of being heard by anyone else until they're as good as Pavarotti or Katy Perry.
So that link, I just want to confirm that link, vocalalchemy.com.au. I think it's /subscription.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
yes,
cool.
It is.
And then just type in Success15 and you'll be able to get that free month, which is very kind of you. Thank you for sharing that.
Not a problem.
Awesome, Tim. Well, I've loved our conversation. I could talk to you for another hour, and we might end up doing another interview with you down the track.
Excellent. Great to talk, mate.
Awesome. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for your time, Clint. Bye, mate.
Are you enjoying the Studio Success Formula podcast? Then we'd love for you to share the love. We want to help more dance studio owners become go-to studios, so we'd greatly appreciate you writing us a review on iTunes. For taking the time out to do so, every month, Clint will be selecting one lucky dance studio owner to receive a Power Business Coaching session. Simply visit the iTunes store today, search for Studio Success Formula, click on ratings and reviews, and then write your review. Thanks in advance. Take care, and we'll see you next time.